The story that I know came from my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. It's 102 years old. Her sister Rose was one of the last children born in a family of 12 children. Okay, 6 boys, 6 girls. They were wonderful people with lots of humor, and they liked new ideas and new things. And Rose was the one who was probably the most educated. She went all the way through 8th grade, and then she took normal training, which was to become a teacher. And you could be certified in Nebraska in those days to teach in country school, which she did. And in those days in country school, there were boys that were almost the same age as their teachers, and sometimes older. And the fact of the matter is, she was harassed by 3 or 4 of these gentlemen, and I use that word advisedly, who said rude things to her, did rude things, and at some point she told her brothers what was going on. And so my great uncle Pete, my great uncle Chris, my great uncle Hank showed up at school one day just to let the guys know that this kind of harassment was not going to continue with their sister. Okay. And so it sort of stopped for a while. She fell in love with a young man who was also teaching school, and he decided that he wanted to go and get more education, and they were going together. And so he went off to school and told her that when he had finished this next stage of his school, he'd come back for her and they would get married. And that was all very exciting. But as time went by, she didn't hear from him. There were no letters that came. And the more that continued, the more she got very, very, very concerned and very depressed. The young man that she was engaged to be married was what they referred to in those days as a breed, meaning he had Native American blood. And so there was a lot of that going on, chipping around, the gossip and stuff. As that happened, there were rumors that began to say that she was having different relationships with different boys and so on and so forth, none of which were true. But you don't stop that kind of bullying and harassment very easily. And so as that stuff began to filter back to her, she got more and more depressed, so much so that great-grandma and grandpa decided that perhaps she ought to be sent to the state hospital for depression. I mean, it was that severe. And there were, things that were going on that were unusual. Well, the end result was she found out that that was a possibility because they didn't talk to her directly about that. And great-grandma sent her out to the chicken house to feed the chickens, and she didn't come back, and she didn't come back, and she didn't come back. And so great-grandma sent my grandmother because they thought the chicken house was on fire. There was smoke coming from there. And what happened was when my grandmother went to the door of the chicken coop, she saw that my great aunt had started a fire in a little haystack that was not far away, and kept trying to run in, and it wasn't run into it, and it wasn't working very well. So she picked up a thing of coal oil and poured it on herself and set herself aflame. The woman doctor was very clear that the rumors about her being pregnant or that she'd been raped, none of that was true. She physically examined Rosie, but she was still under that cloud. And so there are still people that, when they talk about Rosie, that's the story they tell. But the examination did not show that. But it's very clear that she was a subject of awful harassment. Not a lot of people who attended the funeral. There were just issues that way. But when the subject of Rosie came up, usually a silent pall fell over the conversation. Most people didn't really want to talk about it. And of course, they had all of these different stories about it. For whatever reason, my grandmother thought I should know all of these rather gothic stories. In the family, I had lots of questions when I was a kid.